Help, I need to find grants and I need to find them fast. I've gotten that question so many different times, so I wanted to talk a little bit about where you can find grants to help fund your nonprofit. So let's check this out. Well, welcome there. This is Ken McQuiller with the Nonprofit Missionary Podcast. We help empower small to mid-sized churches and faith-based nonprofits to become true missionaries to their communities by helping them establish faith-based nonprofits, secure funding, and focus on impactful outreach. So we are so excited to help bring this tool to you on a regular basis, and it's been great. Here we are, it's September. It's crazy that it's already September, but I think we're also starting to get to that point in the year where we're kind of planning for next year. A lot of churches start kind of building their calendar and everything like that. We have planned out for our after school program through the end of May. I'm working on some stuff for the coffee shop here in a few weeks. I'll give more updates as we go along, but one of the biggest things that I really have loved is working on this and growing our nonprofit business, because my heart and my passion is to see churches grow, not just numerically, not just spiritually, but also financially. And I feel like one of the most underutilized resources are grants. And the best way and the easiest way to get grants for churches is to establish a faith-based nonprofit and do a regular community outreach in whatever fashion that looks like for your context and for your ministry. That might be childcare, that might be supporting single moms, that might be helping with the elderly, that might be a homeless shelter, food pantry. I don't know what your church is like. I don't know what the needs are like in your community, but I know it is successful because not only are we getting funding through a bunch of different foundations, but it's also translating in our Sunday morning service where we're continuing to see growth there. So I want to encourage you, don't be afraid of the nonprofit route. It's something that can be very, very useful for you. And usually as I'm talking about this, and people are like, yes, I see the value in it, they always ask the same question: where can I find grants? So we'll get into that in a little bit here, but first, our nonprofit tip. I wanted to very briefly mention something about the Foundation Center. So this is an episode about finding grants, and one of the ways that you can find grants is through the Foundation Center. It's part of the organization called Candid. Candid also helps you find any nonprofit or foundation that is part of their database. A lot of foundations use Candid to scout different nonprofits as well. But the Foundation Center has a grant database, and I'll get more into that and kind of what that looks like in a second. But what I want to point out is that if you look up on their website, they have collaborations, connections with several libraries around the country where you can get the Foundation Center for free. Usually it's like, I think it's like $1,000 for the year or something like that. But you can actually go into the library, and even if you don't know if they do it, ask them. If you ask it like the circulation desk, hey, do you guys have the Foundation Center online? If they do, they can get you hooked up, set up so that you can access their database. So you don't have to pay for it. Another way that you can have access to it for free, it's not the full bells and whistles version that's at the library, but it is useful enough. If you go through the process of registering your nonprofit through Candid and you have a gold status or higher, it's a gold seal of transparency. Basically, if you give them a lot of information about your nonprofit, what you do, makeup of your board, some of your financials, they will give that to you for free. They'll give you a code. I don't remember what the code is. And then they'll also verify that your organization has it. And yeah, you'll get the Foundation Center for free, nice and easy. So I encourage you to check it out. It's a free resource. I'm always about sharing free resources with my nonprofit missionary community. So check it out. So enough for the chit chat here. Let's talk about finding grants. Because once you start your nonprofit organization, that's usually the next question that I get a lot is, like, where do I look for grants? Like, how do you find grants? How do you know which grants to write? And I'll give a few resources that I want to encourage you to check out. But I also do want to say that finding a grant isn't going to solve everything. Yes, grants help. Grants can help sustain you. Grants can help grow you. And that is absolutely amazing. And we do have some foundations that give to us on a regular basis, where it's not necessarily directly reliable, but if we apply, there's a higher chance that we will get the funding. So grants can be very useful. With grants, we were able to grow our nonprofit from having volunteers getting stipends to paying now 10 different employees. And that is a truly an absolute blessing. And it's not just the work of writing the grants, that's definitely the favor of God that's kind of helped propel us to that level. At the same time, we've also grown in how we do fundraising. We're not just doing grants, we also have our fundraiser banquet. We also solicit individuals and churches and corporations and things like that. So, yes, if you want to get into grants, I love it. I'm there. I'm willing to help. And I know that that's not going to be the end-all be-all for you. You also have to have some individual giving in place. You have to have the other structures so that when you're ready for grants, it'll work. So let's start with where you find grants. And I'll get to some tips on how we can continue to navigate it. So number one, if you're not sure where to look for grants, talk to some of your local organizations. If you have a community development organization, they're a great place to start because they should have some resources as to where to look for particular grants. Local government too. If you talk to your council person, your mayor, however your city is set up, talk to some of the key leaders in your city. They should be able to direct you to where funding is. Sometimes they can direct you to government funding, which is great, and also private foundations. Like, they know who the movers and shakers are. It's important to talk to the people first, because also it doesn't hurt to have a more streamlined connection. So let's say you're talking to ABC Foundation about a $10,000 grant. If Mayor Smith knows ABC Foundation, if you talk to Mayor Smith first, then they can give you an email referral, and it makes it so much easier so that you're not going into a grant application fully blind. So talk to the local people, find out who the movers and shakers are. If you're like, I don't even know who to talk to, that's fine. You can also look at other similar organizations. Depending on the foundation, depending on the stipulations of the grant, some places require you to put their logo on all of your stuff. So let's say if you're doing this big parade, they'll say you have to say sponsored by ABC Foundation, sponsored by the city of Nowhere, USA, like whatever it may be. Sometimes you have to put it there. So you should know by starting a nonprofit, kind of, I hate to say competition, but the other people that are doing things similar to you. So taking our example of the after school program in Cleveland, we know that there is a Boys and Girls Club. A great way to find out some similar fit funders is look up who the Boys and Girls Club have as funders. Sometimes some, especially bigger places, they'll have a specific website that says their biggest partners. Sometimes it'll be on their flyers, so you can always check their social media. Also, you can check their 990, which that's available in a few different places, Candid being one of them. Technically, like if you go to their GuideStar profile, sometimes it'll be on some things like that. So yeah, look at some other organizations and check out what they're doing. Also, like, look at their social media. Sometimes you'll see a shout out to such and such foundation for helping us do this program. Because number one, like the foundation likes when you brag on them, but also number two, the recipient, the nonprofit, is looking to try to build a relationship and show gratitude. So that's something that they'll do as well. So first, talk to the local people. Then look at some other similar organizations to you. I think if you do those two things first, then start looking at software. People want to always just jump to, oh, where's the database of all grants? Grants can be so different because, number one, every grant can be specifically tailored to whatever that organization is. And also, every foundation has their niche. Some are more community-based, some are more education-based, some are more health-based, some are more faith-based. We do have a faith-based foundation that supports the Learning Center. So there's so many different things. So you always just have to make sure that you are talking to the people first, because it's all about having the personal relationship above just having the highest quality grant. But with that, there are a few different softwares that you can check out, because it doesn't really work. I've tried it before, tried it when I first started grant writing. It doesn't work just Googling grants in Cleveland or foundations in Cleveland. It gives you a whole list. So I want to encourage you to check out some softwares. I talked before about the Foundation Center. If your nonprofit is a gold level status on Candid, you have all the stuff on your GuideStar profile, then you get it for free. Or you can check one of the local libraries. And it's a very robust software. Basically, if you were to look up what you do, it'll give you every single foundation that's given to that. So after school program in Cleveland, Ohio, it'll give a list of 1,000 or so different foundations that have given to that. Now, from there, you don't just take it and run with it. Sometimes they give to education, but they only give to a specific area. Like, let's say for us in the after school arena, they only give to schools, like to CMSD. CMSD is still considered education, but they'll never give to an after school program. Or if they're giving to education, but it's specifically early childhood focused, or like secondary education, things like that. So you always have to make sure that you're checking their website, checking if they have a fit, and also checking if they still exist. Because while the Foundation Center is really good and keeps up to date as much as possible, sometimes foundations close because they've run out of the funding, or the people that were running it are no longer there. Or sometimes foundations don't give out funding because they're working on strategic planning and they're looking to try to leverage their dollars in a better way. That usually happens every 4 to 5 years or so. It happened a lot more like about 4 years ago once COVID hit. There's a lot that we're looking at, like racial equity. They were looking at some of the systemic things that rose from the pandemic. So there's a lot of different reasons why things cannot look as they are. So you always want to look, check to see if they actually give, check to see what amount they give. Foundation Center really narrows that down really nicely. Another software to check out that I haven't fully looked at, but I've heard it's really good. I'm not being sponsored by either of these, by the way. I don't know if that's important to say. Check out Instrumental. Instrumental has a much more robust database where you give them the information and they will give you funders. It will be also organized by due date and everything like that. So Instrumental is also one that could be used. Instrumental is not free. You can do like a 14-day free trial, and then I don't know how much it is. I think it's $100 or something like that a month. But make sure you're checking out some type of software just as a secondary thing. Something else to encourage you to do is follow some of these people on social media. Even if you don't get funding from them, typically they will tell you when funding is happening. And also you never know what kind of connections can happen. So as we wrap up this segment here, I want to give you a few tips. First of all, don't ever write grants just blind. Don't just type up an application and send it off. Number one, in my experience, could be different because I'm not the end all be all with grants. In my experience, that doesn't work. If you talk to them, if you tell them your story ahead of time and then send in the application, you have a higher chance of getting something. Or let's say you send in the application and then they reject you. It's a great time to then talk with them and be like, hey, like, can you give me some feedback? Let me explain a couple things. And then, so the next time when the next cycle comes around, you'll have a bigger opportunity. But don't just write them blind. Also consider this, because this happens a lot. Rejections aren't always a reflection on who you are and what your organization is doing. Sometimes it's a combination of they just don't have the extra funding, they aren't accepting new applicants, or you had a high quality grant application, but it just wasn't enough. So don't ever take a no personally. Ask for feedback. I recently got feedback on a grant. I don't really do government grants that much. I've only done like one or two, but I learned a lot from doing this government grant and asking for feedback. So don't take it personally. It's not an attack on you. It's not an attack on your ministry. Satan is not coming for you by getting a no from a foundation. Sometimes it's just a matter of learning the process and learning how the people want it. So don't write them blind. Always talk to someone. Also, not every foundation is a fit for you. There'll be some that are, and it's always great that they are. But some will just never be a fit. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't put out applications. They say it can take up to 3 or 4 times of getting a no before finally getting a yes, depending on the organization, depending on the fit and everything. But not everyone's going to be a fit for you. Just because you do something in education doesn't mean that every educational foundation wants to fund what you're doing. And that's not even just a faith-based thing, that's just a general thing. Sometimes people have their specific priorities and they want to stay in a certain lane. They want to stay with a certain focus, and that's okay. Don't see it as a bad thing. Not everyone's going to fit you. But through finding the right fit foundations and kind of doing some of the research to make sure that they are a good fit can really help you take things to the next level. So yeah, don't write grants blind. Not every foundation is a fit for you. And last, make sure that you have everything in order before you hit submit. And I'm not just saying making sure that your grant has high quality, but also look at how your organization is structured. Because something that they consider is, are you going to be able to handle the funds? Let's say you're asking for a $50,000 grant and your organizational budget is $25,000 for the year. Your 990 has shown that you've made less than $30,000 each of the last 3 years. They're not going to fund $50,000 because they think that that's too much of a big jump and you won't be able to handle the funds. If your project budget is $10,800 and you're asking them for $10,000, they will not fund it. They want to know that there's other people that are helping with this, so then if they aren't able to fund you next year because the economy goes bad or they have emergency repairs that they have to take care of, they want to make sure that your project will be sustained and that it's not fully on them. And also they'll look at how you're structured in terms of your board, not just the people that are on the board, but are there severe conflicts of interest? Do you have 8 relatives that are the only ones that are on the board? Is the head of the board and the executive director, is there a conflict of interest there? Because the board chair because the board chair is the one that kind of helps set the salary for the executive director. So they'll check all of that stuff out. Also, some will do the research on your bylaws, because bylaws are public information. So they'll make sure that you do have conflict of interest in there. They'll make sure that you have all of the structures in place. They'll look at your 990. So don't say that your organization is taking a $500,000 increase over the next year when you haven't had over $100,000 ever. So there are so many different things that they'll look at. They'll also ask around. Sometimes they'll call board members and kind of chat with them. But they will look. It's their job to do some research and to make sure that you can handle the funds. Not because they're trying to scout you out and to try to catch you in a lie or something like that. But foundations are tasked when they give out money that they're giving it out for a specific purpose and so that it will help the community. They don't want to give it to people that aren't doing best practices, that aren't following proper policies and procedures. So make sure you check that out. With that said, let's get into a little bit of a Confessions of a Missionary. Now, I always say that Confessions of a Missionary is kind of more of a real life look at what it takes to be a missionary. I've been a missionary now for 8 years, and there are some awful things about being a missionary, just like there is about any position in ministry, nonprofit world, for-profit world, anything. There's always goods and bads. There's no perfect anything. But I feel like a lot of times I talk about the negative. Today I wanted to talk about one of the positive things. And I think a very big positive for me is how much God continues to provide for us. So I want to kind of give a little bit of my missionary journey. So I first came to Cleveland as a missionary intern, single. I was living upstairs from the church in the attic, rent-free. I was paid like a couple $100s as like a stipend. All I needed were expenses for my car. Student loans were in deferment for like 6 months. And so I just needed like enough money for food and gas, and my car was paid off, so just insurance. So with all of that, I wasn't making a lot. And I talked about this a little bit in the first episode, so if you want to check it out, go ahead. So then I started to like Shelby, and I was like, well, if we're going to make this work, I got to make more money. So I got a job at Amazon, which if you've ever worked graveyard shift, bro, I'll pray for you. Sis, I'll pray for you, because it's hard. I worked from 3 to 8 in the morning, sorting packages at the first Amazon sort facility in our area. It was great because I was able to buy a ring, and then it became too much to do because after school program started and I was too tired. I was missing everything. So I made the decision to quit. And it was right then and there that a few churches that I had been kind of reaching out to but really haven't heard back from started supporting me on a regular basis. And then also I was able to do a mission service that got me a lot of funding to kind of help continue to supplant that. So Shelby and I get married. And then at the time she was working at a mental health nonprofit, and the work environment was becoming too toxic. She had gotten a new supervisor, and the supervisor was not doing well. So then it was just becoming too much, and it was hurting her more than it was helping. So she wanted to go into just doing private practice. She had been doing a couple clients on the side, but then it was a big source of our income at the time. But we knew that she couldn't be there anymore. So she put in her 2 weeks, and literally 3 days later, I ended up getting a part-time job at a local credit union to kind of help with that, with the money that we would have lost. So she builds up her client base. She also gets a part-time job at Notre Dame, and I'm working at Emerald, and it started to drain on me. I was always working. whether it was at the credit union, whether it was at the learning center. Like, we were newly married, married less than a year. And then, and of course, Shelby then gets pregnant with Isaac. So it's just becoming a lot. And I was very fortunate because they gave me a month off to be with Isaac and to help with the baby and all. But then it just was becoming too much. So once again, we made the decision, I gotta leave the credit union. And we took a step of faith. And once again, God provided in crazy ways. More people, it was another big spike in missions giving, and everything was going well. And then Shelby had the baby, and she couldn't take on any more clients through her private practice. It just took a while she needed her time off and all. So then that's when we had gotten a big grant to kind of help pay a few of our employees, including her, a little bit more. And what I'm getting at is every time we've had to do a transition, God has provided in crazy ways. As a missionary, it can be very, the idea of fundraising can take up a lot of your brain space, especially when you're on the itineration mode, especially when you lose funding, because that always happens. But it's just crazy how God always provides. And I know for me, besides being a missionary, I know that through our ministry, God will always provide for us. And it's something that I've learned here, and I want to encourage to all of those out there, not just pastors, not just those that work in ministry. God will always provide for you. You just got to continue to trust in him and trust the process. Also, don't leave any stone unturned. I'm not saying that these people gave me random checks. These were people I've been reaching out to for years when it came to missions funding. And I think the timing is very curious. The jobs that I talked about that we got, it was something that was in the works and in the making. Here at the coffee shop, every time I'm our balance is looking kind of low, a grant comes in, we get people that want to do events. It's always crazy and awesome how God provides. So just keep the faith. God will provide for you. God will provide for your ministry. So that's Confessions of a Missionary for this week. I love you guys, and reach out if you have any questions, if you have any concerns. If you need a grant written, I got you. If you need a nonprofit started, I got you. If you just need some strategy, we're working on strategic planning for our organization. I'm being contracted to do that as a grant writer, so I can do that for you as well. So if you need anything, we got you. Until next time, this is Kevin McQuiller with the Nonprofit Missionary Podcast. See you then.